as we are approaching the end of summer break, most parents are discussing schools and their concern regarding in-person or virtual learning. Given the unique challenges immigrants face, we will talk about recent publications, expert opinions, and resources you need to make the right decision, plus 10 tips to optimize virtual learning for your children. So go ahead, grab your cup of tea, and join me in this episode of Empowering Conversations. Hello and welcome to the Empowering Conversations podcast, a place to get inspired, challenged, and empowered by stories of immigrants who build their success from zero. I'm your host, Mehran. When Christina Farr, CNBC writer, asked 20 doctors, public health experts, and epidemiologists with school-age children if they will send their kids back to school or not, the answers were widely varied and dependent on the age of the child, their location, personal risk tolerance, the degree of support at home, and the school's safety measures. Out of 20 asked, 6 were sending their kids to school. 8 were in a wait-and-see mode, and 6 committed to virtual learning at least for the beginning of the year. Sanjay Gupta announced a few days ago that he will not be sending his daughters back to school, despite the safety measures in place. Chicago public schools will begin the year online. In San Diego, where I live, many districts are resuming virtual learning, while elementary schools are filing for waivers to allow reopening their doors. Many districts across the country push back their opening dates to prepare. Uncertainty is circling our schools and even our universities. Many universities started the year online. But Johns Hopkins University switched from an in-person to virtual learning only last week. But this doesn't mean that every university is following suit. For example, Washington University in St. Louis announced on July 31st to offer hybrid classes for the students instead of the original plan to be online only. So if you're one of the many parents who are scratching your head and wondering what should you do, or second-guessing your decision, you're not alone. If you're someone unclear about the school's plan, you're not alone. And if your school cannot make their mind regarding this matter, they're not alone either. The schools are under great pressure from the White House, families, and the students to reopen. This is when they are expected to increase student safety with their limited funding. New York Times published an article on July 11th about the teachers who feel pressured and angry over the decision to reopen. Quote, "The teachers' union in Los Angeles, the nation's largest district, demanded full-time remote learning when the academic year begins on August 18th, and called President Trump's push to reopen schools part of a dangerous anti-science agenda that puts the lives of our members, our students, and our families at risk," unquote. According to their polls, nearly 77% of teachers are worried about risking their health by going back to schools. Given in some districts, the custodial staff were cut down and the teachers were required to clean their own rooms, they doubt whether the schools will provide the supplies needed to clean the surfaces according to Center for Disease Control, or CDC. However, according to polls, 60% of American adults with primary and secondary school-age children believe in reopening the schools. According to surveys, many parents are exhausted from carrying their youth 24/7, following up with their schoolwork beside their work and various responsibilities they have. This percentage might be slightly higher among immigrants who lack reliable child support and work multiple jobs. those who lack the time or the resources necessary to support their children in an online setting, those with limited language and computer proficiency whose children will fall behind with no fault of their own. Based on that, it is understandable why opening the schools will be beneficial to some under CDC's new protocol. Based on the research done in the States and around the globe, CDC recently released a protocol under which students should be able to attend the schools safely. Now let's look at the data. According to Science magazine, 20 countries reopened their schools by early June, while some countries like Taiwan, Nicaragua, Sweden never closed theirs. Given the mounting data from these schools and other scientific research, it is suggested to keep students in small groups, clean and disinfect touch surfaces frequently, have everybody wear masks while maintaining some social distance. But experts believe it is not only about the adjustments schools make. It is also about how much the virus is circulating in our communities. Because after all, our children are bringing the virus to school from somewhere. And according to research, most young students contract the virus from their parents rather than peers, since they rarely get too close to one another for an extended period of time, unlike our high schoolers. This means we as parents have the obligation to keep our schools and communities safe by continuing to limit our exposure according to CDC guidelines. Now you must wonder how likely our children will contract the virus. Various studies show the attack rate in people under the age of 14 to be lower than adults. While the studies are limited and research is underway, few examples show promising trends. For example, in February, when the pandemic was thought to be confined to China, 2 high school teachers in a small town in northern Paris developed minor respiratory systems. Undiagnosed, they continued their daily activities until few individuals were hospitalized and tested positive for COVID. Late March, Arnaud Fontanet, an epidemiologist at Pasteur Institute, tested the high school students and the staff as well as the elementary schools to see if they contracted the virus or not. The antibody testing revealed that in the high school, 38% of the students, 43% of the teachers, and 59% of non-teaching staff had been infected. On the contrary, in the 6 elementary schools in the town, only 3 children contracted the virus, leaving the scientists to believe the exposure was through the family members rather than the schoolmates. Another example was the one in New Zealand, where 96 people in a high school tested positive for COVID, while the neighboring elementary school saw only a few cases. But the data is not as definitive. There were other cases in Israel and Canada where elementary schools had a high level of infection. While the data is still inconclusive, but it is generally believed by the scientist community that younger kids have a lower chance in contracting and transmitting the virus. In the show notes, I provide you with the original resources so you can read and interpret the data yourself. But keep in mind, our understandings are changing on a daily basis, and it is important to keep ourselves updated. Given the uncertainty, the question is, what should we do? While closing the schools in March to limit the spread of COVID-19 was necessary and the efforts were highly commendable, prolonged school closures are believed to negatively impact children's physical and mental health. Besides providing education and social skills for our children, schools provide critical services such as meal programs and behavioral and mental health services to students and families. According to the data from National School Lunch Program, 20.1 million lunches were offered freely in 2019. and 1.7 million received them at 40 cents a meal. So you can imagine the impact some of us have felt by keeping our kids at home. Combine that with social isolation our children feel, lack of connection with their peers, the increased level of anxiety, depression, and stress among their parents, which results into surge of child abuse. So being restricted to virtual learning not only limits their access to school programs that supports them physically and emotionally, but also negatively impacts their academic performances. According to a study by Fitzpatrick, in 2020, students' achievement is uniformly and profoundly obstructed by virtual setting in two key areas: English or language arts and math. The students in the study who switched from public school to a virtual charter school on average showed 11 percentile loss in English or language arts and 16 percentile in math scores over a 4-year period. Now, I understand how some of our schools committed to virtual learning, leaving us with no option, but let's keep in mind that circumstances can change. Personally speaking, what COVID had taught me was being flexible and eliminating the urge to plan too far ahead. For us, our school has promised to reopen next week, which leaves us the option to send our 9-year-old boy to school. As parents, my husband and I were torn between two very difficult choices: to send him to school and risk our family's health, or to keep him at home and face the difficulties we've been facing for the past months, keeping him entertained, engaged, and socially and emotionally supported, especially as a single child to a pair of working parents. Our son has been regressing on various subjects while getting stronger on math and sciences that we can support him on. He has been gaining weight despite our efforts to keep him physically active. He has a lot more screen time than we ever desired. He feels lonely most of the time and asks us repeatedly for playdates. While we try our best to play with him between work meetings, but we know how much he misses the social interaction he gets from his friends at school. For that, and because he's young and we don't have a high-risk individual living with us, we have decided to send him back to school if our school actually reopens. But originally, when my mom was living with us, we chose virtual learning. It was after she moved back to Iran that my husband and I changed our decision. But I have to be honest with you. Until 3 days ago, when the school provided a detailed plan on how to limit kids' exposure to COVID, we were still uncertain. Not only our school will be checking students' temperature daily, but also they are renting gazebos to set the classes outside. They will be requiring masks, enforcing social distancing, and they will be frequently sanitizing the touch surfaces. Additionally, our infection numbers are relatively low. But as we proceed, we will keep our eyes on these numbers, especially during fall and winter when the seasons change. We will try our best to stay optimistic while planning for the days that kids will be sent home for extended period of time, like if they find an infected individual at school, or if the conditions are worsened and the schools shut down as it did in March. If you have the choice, will you be sending your kids back to school given the information available? Or will you continue virtual learning? Or will you start with one and switch to the other if necessary? The decision is yours. As you're making your decision, we hope you look at CDC's checklist. Ask the questions they suggest from your school. Talk and communicate with your teachers. Read and educate yourself and look at all aspects of the situation. We know you will making the best decision for your families. So let's get to the second part of the episode. 10 tips to optimize virtual learning. As explained previously, students' grade and learning will be heavily impacted in a virtual setting. But now that many of us are forced to opt for virtual learning, let's figure out ways to improve learning and increase engagement so that our kids, whom we are pouring our future into, get the best education possible. But before we start, let me remind you that the online learning system differs greatly from an in-person and will require you as the parent, mom, and dad, or the guardian to work closely with the teachers and the students. Unlike the in-person setting, we cannot drop our kids off by their computers in the morning and pick them up at 3 p.m. with the expectation to achieve a similar outcome. For a virtual learning to work, parents, teachers, and the students have to make a coalition to achieve what the teacher and the students in an in-person setting achieved. So parents, brace for impact, because you will need to work as hard as your teachers and your students. Now let's get to the meat of it. 10 tips to enhance virtual learning. 1. Get to know your teachers and ask them what they expect of the students by the end of the school year. This will provide you with the compass to measure the students' progress. During the year, keep contact with your teachers and stay informed, whether you have one teacher or many. It is your responsibility as a parent to stay informed. 2. Encourage your teachers to use various ways to measure student learning. Request to have online quizzes, chats, surveys, video messaging to ensure your children absorb and retain the material delivered to them. As you're posing your request, please be mindful of the teacher's schedule and the responsibilities they have regarding other students. Speak calmly, voice your requests specifically, appreciate their efforts, and offer your own support. Remember, no contribution is ever too small. 3. Learn the parent portal and become comfortable navigating and reviewing assignments, grades, notes, etc. And find ways to interact with their teachers. Be comfortable to communicate with your teachers regarding your children's needs and what you as the parent need. Keeping the communication gates open would limit surprises and enable you, as I mentioned earlier, to know about your students' progress. 4. Help your child develop a routine. Use calendars, timers, whiteboards to create a specific routine for your child. Help them understand the difference between work time and playtime. Most students can work for 45 to 50 minutes before taking a short 10 to 15 minute break. This is what they are accustomed to at a school setting, so don't underestimate their ability. During the break time, avoid any additional screen time. This should be the time for them to unwind, relax, stretch, have a snack, and do a short physical activity. And then once that's done, guide them to get back to work. I know for some of you this feels like a lot of work. And perhaps it will be. But trust me, it only takes some discipline at the beginning and frequent monitoring once the routine is set. Keep in mind that more structure in the beginning is better for you and for the kids. And as you establish the new routine, make your personal adjustments later. 5. Creating a specific workspace is essential in enhancing kids' focus time. A table, a chair, a whiteboard, a partition in a quiet corner is all your child needs to focus. And remember to keep away any devices or games that can be distractive to them. I don't know about you, but I was raised in a home that our TV was constantly on. So please turn off TV. And if you have multiple kids, find creative ways to create a quiet space for one's attending school. If you haven't done so already, listen to our 5th episode where Doris talks about kids with multilingual ability. 6. Make sure your students attend every session and become part of the community by staying active in the discussions. It is your job as a parent to follow through, as hard as it seems. Ask engaging questions, and instead of questioning them to extract information, listen for their struggles and where they need your support. 7. Review schoolwork frequently. If you can, proofread their work, check for spelling, punctuation, and other grammatical errors before they turn it in. I know not having English as your first language, this might be a little difficult, but try your best anyways. 8. Hire a virtual tutor if you can afford. I talked to a parent a few days ago who called me on her way home because that's all the time she had to herself. She said, Mehran, I'm exhausted. I leave work, and when I get home, I have to help my daughter with her chemistry homework. Then it's my son who needs me for his physics assignment, and then I work with my 10-year-old. Most of the time, I don't have time to eat anything until 9 p.m., and given the kids' new schedule, they're awake until 12 a.m., leaving me no time to rest. I'm exhausted. To her, I suggested hiring a virtual tutor. With almost 10% unemployment rate, not only you reduce the pressure on yourself, but also you create jobs for the people in your community. 9. Ask your schools about additional services that your child received prior to the pandemic. Services such as reading specialists, speech-language therapists, instructional aides, counselors, nurses, and case managers. Again, be mindful that this will take some time and be ready to help when you can to support your school personnel. 10. Focus on your personal relationships with your children. As a recovering perfectionist, sometimes I know I focus too much on the outcome, on its quality. But let's face it, our kids are still kids, and they are one of the 56.6 million kids that are attending schools this year. And that's in the States alone. We're not the only one facing these challenges. So try your best to manage your personal stress levels. There's no perfect outcome. Think of the perfectionist Mo in my 8th episode, who was stressed and overwhelmed all the time. Do you remember the options he had? If not, go back and listen again. Now let me recap. 1. Know your teachers. 2. Use different tools to engage your students. 3. Learn the parent portal. 4. Create routine. 5. Create a workspace. 6. Keep tab of your kids' schedule and make sure they attend their classes. 7. Review their work. 8. Hire a tutor. 9. Request help. 10. Focus on your relationship. And if you're a perfectionist, listen to my 8th episode again. Now I know many of you are exhausted already. The past 5 months have been incredibly difficult given all the challenges we face as a parent with limited emotional and physical support. It is difficult to live in a country without your community and your loved ones. It is not easy to bear the pressure of supporting your family when your income is impacted. I know how much you dream of a normal life. I know how much you dream of dropping your kids at school and driving to work carefree, sitting by yourself and reading a book peacefully, visiting your friends and families back home, going to parties and dancing through the night with your friends, doing your grocery shopping unaware of the germs that are sitting on your food. You want to breathe the fresh air without wearing your mask in the summer's heat. It has been a tiresome journey for all of us. Every one of us around the globe have felt it. But as you're thinking of all that has been difficult for you, I want you to think of all that you can be grateful for. Because for the most part, we are healthy. Our kids are healthy. We have a roof over our head, enough to eat, clean water to drink, access to health clinics. So mom or dad, I want you to pat yourself on the back for all the great things you've done for your children, for all the concerns you have for their well-being. You're doing a fantastic job. I know life gets so busy that you forget to give yourself enough credit. But please remember, quote, we don't know where we're going and we don't know what's going to happen. But no one can take away from you what you put in your mind, unquote. I heard this quote from Judith Eager, Holocaust survivor, a few days ago in TEDx San Diego. As I listened to her, I thought, wow, how relevant that is during these trying times. How easily we can shift our minds and not allow negativity and uncertainty seep in our minds, our souls, and our homes. You are making the best decision for your children. Online or virtual, both can be optimized, and it is upon all of us. Continue focusing on the community. Continue reading and educating yourself. Let go of small things and see what you can do for the parents, the students, and the teachers who lack the resources many of us do. If you know of any organization that is supporting those in need during these trying times, please write a comment and let our community know. As always, thank you for listening and sharing our episodes with your friends and writing us a review. Your reviews on iTunes help us to be found easier. You, my audience, mean the world to me, and I know I will see you and your friends in the next episode of Empowering Conversations, where all of us can learn from successful immigrants, one conversation at a time.